Chapter number 4, ICAI questions. Illustration 1. Background. During the process of extracting the exceptions reports, the auditors noted numerous purchase entries without valid purchase orders. Analysis. In terms of percentage, about 40% of the purchases were made without valid purchase orders, and also few purchase orders were validated after the actual purchase. Also, there was no reconciliation between the goods received and the goods ordered. Assertions. What assertions we will check? Validity of the purchases. Next, pervasive or account balance level. Account balance level. Account balances affected. Purchases and accounts payable. Audit procedures. The following procedures may address the validity of the account balances. Make a selection of the purchases. Review correspondence with the vendors. Purchase requisitions, internal document, and the reconciliation of their accounts. Review vendor listing along with the aging details. Follow up the material amounts paid before the normal credit period and analyze the reasons for exceptions. Meet with the company's purchase officer and obtain responses to our inquiries regarding the purchases made without purchase orders. Discuss the summary of such issues with the client. Next, test your understanding question number 1. CAR is conducting statutory audit of a division office (DO) of a public sector insurance company. On going through delegations of the powers laid down by the company's head office, it is noticed that surveyors in claims under property insurance policies beyond estimated amounts of 30 lakhs are to be appointed by Divisional Claims Committee (DCC). However, on going through surveyor appointment details of 10 such claims during the year, 5 instances have come to his notice where above delegation of powers has not been followed and appointments were made by a division manager in the place of DCC. In the beginning, the auditor had assessed risk of material misstatements to be low. Describe why above findings would change auditor's assessment in relation to the above. Evaluation of internal controls influences auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatements. Risk of material misstatements also consists of control risk. In the given situation of statutory audit of a division office of a public sector insurance company, it is noted that procedure relating to delegation of powers has not been followed and surveyor appointments have been made in violation of laid down procedures. It is a serious violation and shows that controls are not operating effectively as laid down by the company management. Such deviations from established controls may lead auditor to conclude that control risk need to be revised. Revision of control risk assessment is likely to lead to revision in risk of material misstatements. It may also result in modification of nature, timing, and extent of planned substantive procedures. Next question, test your understanding question number 2. You have recently been appointed as an auditor of NGO working in the field of upholding democracy for the first time. The last year accounts of NGO were unaudited and its activities were limited to a small scale. However, it is only in the current year that NGO has received substantial donations from foreign funds. The said NGO is also crowdfunding its donations. The government has now legislative power to cancel FCRA certificate of NGO since it is working in field which encompasses political and social fields. Accusations and counter accusations are flying thick and fast. What factors you may consider for assessing audit risk? For assessing audit risk, auditors shall consider all components of audit risk. The said NGO is working in a political social field which can make its activities inherently risky. Crowdfunding donations may have to be seen in relation to constitution of NGO, which may make these risky. Since the NGO is in receipt of foreign funds, it may make transactions inherently risky. The credibility and the integrity of the persons behind NGO is important. Shady NGOs can be involved in money laundering activities and may be involved in misutilization of the funds from donors. Since last year accounts were unaudited, it also increases inherent risk due to probable effects of misstatements, if any, of the last year. Non-compliance with strict laws has the potential to make activities of NGO inherently risky. Since NGO has received substantial donations in the current year and its activities were on the relatively small scale during last year, formal controls may not be in place. Lack of formal controls may lead to non-compliance with laws. Non-compliance with FCRA can have serious consequences, including cancelling such certificate of NGO. Therefore, control risk could be high. Further, audit of NGO has been accepted for the first time. There may be the lack of understanding of the activities of NGO. It may lead to higher detection risk due to inappropriate sampling procedures or faulty application of audit procedures. Next, test your understanding question number 3. RK Living Limited is engaged in manufacturing and processing of textile fabrics. It purchases its raw materials from a company based in Silvassa, taxable at 12%. It takes about 3 to 4 days for raw materials to reach the company's plant. Recently, the company has revamped its internal control system for recording its transactions. You may also assume charge as head of internal audit department of the company few days before. It is noticed that information system requires bookings of purchases in purchase ledger and stock records from date of purchase on purchase invoice only. From date of purchase invoice only, how you would deal with above matter as internal auditor of the company. Internal audit involves continuous and critical appraisal of functioning of an entity with a view to suggest improvements thereto and add value to and strengthen the overall governance mechanism of the entity, including its strategic risk management and internal control system. Internal audit also involves evaluation of internal control to provide assurance to the management regarding design, implementation, and operating effectiveness of the control. In the given situation, information system requires booking of purchases in purchase ledger and stock records from date of invoice. Such a control system is likely to present a distorted picture of stocks of the company. It would show stocks of raw materials as received, whereas these stocks could be in transit. These stocks could be in transit. Therefore, design of the control itself is faulty, which allows booking from date of purchase invoice only. Further, such a system can have implications with respect to GST laws. The internal auditor should report above matter, asking management for corrective action. Next question. Question number 4. Test your understanding. Question number 4. A company, as part of its internal control setup, has a system under which quarterly budgeted targets in respect of sales are analyzed with respect to actual performance achieved. It also involves fixing responsibilities of different product departmental heads and taking timely corrections. In case of product departmental heads not achieving quarterly budgeted targets, they have to give a detailed justification for the same and also lay down how shortfalls would be compensated in ensuing quarters. Identify and explain component of internal control alluded to in above scenario. The above referred component of internal control is control activities. Control activities that may be relevant to an audit includes policies and procedures that pertain to performance reviews. Such control activities include reviews and analysis of actual performance versus budgets, forecast, and prior period performance, relating different sets of data, operating or financial, to one another, together with analysis of the relationships and investigative and corrective actions, comparing internal data with external source of information, and review of functional or activity performance. The control activities pertaining to analysis of a budgeted target of sales with respect to actual performance, fixing of responsibilities, and taking timely corrective actions falls in the nature of performance reviews. Such performance reviews are part of control activities, which is a component of internal control. Next question, test your understanding. Question number 5. CAS is statutory auditor of a listed company. On reviewing internal controls of the company, he is of the view that there can be possible situations where insurance premiums for keeping insurance policies current in respect of various assets of the company may have become due and payable, but internal control systems established by the company may not be able to capture it. Elaborate how he should proceed to deal with above matter. A deficiency in internal control exists when a control is designed, implemented, or operated in such a way that it is unable to prevent, detect, or correct misstatements in the financial statements on a timely basis, or a control necessary to prevent or detect and correct misstatements in the financial statements on a timely basis is missing. In the above situation, there is a possibility that internal control systems established by the company may not be able to capture insurance premiums which may have become due and payable. It is a significant deficiency as failure to keep insurance policies current would render assets of the company uninsured. It may lead to losses for the company in case of any eventuality. Further, in accordance with SA 265, the significance of a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control depends not only on whether a misstatement has actually occurred, but also on the likelihood that a misstatement could occur and the potential magnitude of the misstatement. Significant deficiencies may therefore exist even though the auditor has not identified misstatements during the audit. The susceptibility of loss of an asset is a factor in determining whether a deficiency constitutes a significant deficiency in internal control. The auditor shall communicate in writing significant deficiency in internal control to those charged with governance and include in the written communication of significant deficiencies in internal control a description of the deficiencies and an explanation of their potential effects and sufficient information to enable those charged with governance and management to understand the context of the communication. Theoretical question, question number 1. CAB was appointed as the auditor of ABC Limited for the financial year 22-23. During the course of planning for the audit, CAB intends to apply the concept of materiality for the financial statements as a whole. Please guide him with respect to the factors that may affect the identification of an appropriate benchmark for this purpose. What benchmark should be adopted by CAB if ABC Limited is engaged in manufacture and sale of air conditioners and is having regular profits, the construction of large infrastructure projects and incurred losses in the previous 2 financial years due to pandemic? Use of benchmarks in determining materiality for the financial statements as a whole. As per SA 320, determining materiality involves the exercise of professional judgment. A percentage is often applied to a chosen benchmark as a starting point in determining the materiality for the financial statements as a whole. Factors that may affect the identification of an appropriate benchmark includes the following: the elements of financial statements, for example, assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, expenses, whether there are items on which the attention of the users of a particular entity's financial statements tend to be focused. For example, for the purpose of evaluating financial performance, users may tend to focus on profit, revenue, or net assets. The nature of the entity, where the entity is at, in its life cycle, and the industry and economic environment in which the entity operates, the entity's ownership structure, and the way it is financed. For example, if an entity is financed solely by debt rather than equity, users may put more emphasis on the assets and claims on them than on the entity's earnings and the relative volatility of the benchmark. Determining a percentage to be applied to a chosen benchmark involves the exercise of the professional judgment. there is a relationship between percentage and the chosen benchmark such that a percentage applied to profit before tax from continuing operations will normally be higher than the percentage applied to total revenue. In case if ABC Limited is engaged in manufacture and sale of air conditioner and is having regular profits, CAB, the auditor, may consider profits before tax or earnings. Profits before tax or earnings. In case if ABC Limited is engaged in construction of a large infrastructure projects and incur losses in the previous 2 financial years due to pandemic, CAB, the auditor, may consider revenue or gross profit as benchmarking. Alternatively, CAB, the auditor, may consider the criteria relevant for the audit of entities doing public utility programs or projects, total cost or net cost. Net cost means expenses less revenue or expenditure less receipts may be appropriate benchmarks for that particular program or project activity. Where an entity has custody of assets, assets may be appropriate benchmark. Next question, what are the components of an internal control framework? There are 5 components of an internal control framework. They are as follows: control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, monitoring, control activities. These are the 5 components of internal control framework. Next question, question number 3. During the course of his audit, the auditor noticed material weaknesses in the internal control system and he wishes to communicate the same to the management. You are required to elucidate the important points the auditor should keep in mind while drafting the letter of weakness in internal control system. Important points to be kept in mind while drafting letter of weakness. As per SA 265, communicating deficiencies in internal control to those charged with governance and management, the auditor shall include in the written communication of significant deficiencies in internal control a description of deficiencies and an explanation of their potential effects and sufficient information to enable those charged with governance and management to understand the context of communication. In other words, the auditor should communicate material weaknesses to the management or the audit team, if any, on a timely basis. This communication should be preferably in writing through a letter of weakness or management letter. Important points with regard to such letter are as follows. The letter lists down the areas of weaknesses in the system and offers suggestions for improvement. It should clearly indicate that it discusses only weaknesses which have come to the attention of the auditor as a result of his audit, and that his examination has not been designed to determine the adequacy of internal control for management. This letter serves as a valuable reference document for management for the purpose of revising the systems and insisting on its strict implementation. The letter may also serve to minimize legal liability in the event of a major defalcation or other loss resulting from a weaknesses in internal control. Next question, question number 4. Explain briefly the flowchart technique for evaluation of the internal control system. The flowcharting technique can also be resorted to for evaluation of internal control system. It is a graphical presentation of internal controls in the organization and is normally drawn up to show the controls in each section or subsection. As distinct from a narrative form, it provides the most concise and comprehensive way for reviewing the internal controls and the evaluator's findings. In a flowchart, narratives, though cannot perhaps be totally banished and reduced to the minimum, and by that process, it can successfully bring the whole control structure, especially the essential parts thereof, in a condensed but wholly meaningful manner. It gives a bird's eye view of the system and is drawn up as a result of auditor's review thereof. It should, however, not be understood that details are not reflected in the flowchart. Every detail relevant from the control point of view and the details about how a operation is performed can be included in the flowchart. Essentially, a flowchart is a diagram full with lines and symbols, and if judicious use of them can be made, it is probably the most effective way of presenting the state of internal controls in the client's organization. Next question, question number 5. As auditor of Z Limited, you would like to limit your examination of account balances. What are the control objectives you would like the accounting control system to achieve to suit your purpose? Basic accounting control objectives. The basic accounting control objectives which are sought to be achieved by an accounting control system are whether all transactions are recorded, whether recorded transactions are real, whether all recorded transactions are properly valued, whether all transactions are recorded timely, whether all transactions are properly posted, whether all transactions are properly classified and disclosed, whether all transactions are properly summarized. Next, test your knowledge, question number 6. New Life Hospital is a multi-specialty hospital which has been facing a lot of pilferage and troubles regarding their inventory maintenance and control. On investigation into the matter, it was found that the person in charge of inventory inflow and outflow from the storehouse is also responsible for purchases and maintaining inventory controls. According to you, which basis system of control has been violated? Also list down the other general conditions pertaining to such system which need to be maintained and checked by the management. Basic system of control. Internal checks and internal audit are important constituents of accounting controls. Internal check system implies organization of the overall system of bookkeeping and arrangement of staff duties in such a way that no one person can carry through a transaction and record every aspect thereof. In the given case of a New Life Hospital, the person in charge of inventory inflow and outflow from the storehouse is also responsible for purchases and maintaining inventory records. Thus, one of the basic system of control, that is internal check, which includes segregation of duties or maker and checker, has been violated where transaction processing are allocated to different persons in such a manner that no one person can carry through the completion of the transaction from start to finish, or the work of one person is made complementary to the work of another person. The general condition pertaining to the internal check system may be summarized as under. No single person should have complete control over any important aspect of the business operation. Every employee's action should come under the review of another person. Staff duties should be rotated from time to time so that members do not perform the same function for a considerable length of time. Every member of the staff should be encouraged to go on leave at least once a year. Persons having physical custody of assets must not be permitted to have access to the books of accounts. There should exist an accounting control in respect of each class of assets. In addition, there should be periodical inspection so as to establish their physical condition. Mechanical devices should be used wherever practicable to prevent loss or misappropriation of assets, misappropriation of cash. Budgetary control should be exercised and wide deviations observed should be reconciled. For inventory taking at the close of the year, trading activities should, if possible, be suspended, and it should be done by staff belonging to several sections of the organization. The financial and administrative powers should be distributed very judiciously among different officers, and the manner in which those are actually exercised should be reviewed periodically. Procedures should be laid down for periodical verification and testing of different sections of accounting records to ensure that they are accurate. Next, test your knowledge, question number 7. Compute the overall audit risk. If looking to the nature of the business, there are chances that 40% bills of the services provided would be defalcated. Enquiring on the same matter, management has assured that internal control can prevent such a defalcation to 75%. At his part, the auditor assessed that the procedure he could apply in the remaining time to complete audit gives him satisfaction level of detection of frauds and errors to an extent of 60%. Analyze the risk of material misstatements and find out the overall audit risk. According to SA 200, overall objectives of an independent auditor and conduct of an audit in accordance with standards on auditing. The audit risk is a risk that the auditor will issue an inappropriate opinion while financial statements are materially misstated. Audit risk has two components: risk of material misstatements and detection risk. The risk can be defined as follows: audit risk equals to risk of material misstatements into detection risk. Risk of material misstatements means risk of material misstatements is an anticipated risk that a material misstatement may exist in the financial statements before start of the audit. It has two components: inherent risk and control risk. The relationship can be defined as risk of material misstatements equals to inherent risk into control risk. Inherent risk: it is a susceptibility of an assertion about account balance, class of transaction, disclosure towards misstatement, which may be either individually or collectively with other misstatements, becomes material before considering any relevant internal controls, which is 40% in the given case. Control risk: it is a risk that there may be chances of material misstatements even if there is a control applied by the management and it has prevented defalcation to 75%. Hence, control risk is 25%, that is 100% minus 75%. Risk of material misstatements: inherent risk into control risk, that is 40% into 25%, that is 10%. Chances of material misstatements are reduced to 10% by the internal control applied by the management. Detection risk: it is the risk that the material misstatement remained undetected even if all the audit procedures applied. Detection risk is 100% minus 60%, that is 40%. In the given case, overall audit risk can be reduced up to 4% as follows: audit risk equals to risk of material misstatements into detection risk, that is 10% into 40%, that is 4%. Next, test your knowledge question number 8. ST Limited is growing company and currently engaged in the business of manufacturing of tiles. The company is planning to expand and diversify its operations. The management has increased the focus on the internal controls to ensure better governance. The management had a discussion with the statutory auditors to ensure the steps required to be taken so that the statutory audit is risk-based and focused on areas of greatest risk to the achievement of the company's objectives. Please advise the management and the auditor on the steps that should be taken for the same. General steps in the conduct of risk-based audit. The auditor's objective in a risk-based audit is to obtain reasonable assurance that no material misstatements, whether caused by fraud or errors, exist in the financial statements. This involves the following three key steps: assessing the risk of material misstatements in the financial statements, designing and performing further audit procedures that respond to assessed risks and reduce the risks of material misstatements in the financial statements to an acceptable low level, and issuing an appropriate audit report based on audit findings. The risk-based audit process is presented in three distinct phases: risk assessment, risk response, and reporting. Next question, test your knowledge question number 9. Y Company Limited has 5 entertainment centers to provide recreational facilities for public, especially for children and youngsters, at 5 different locations in the peripheral of 200 kilometers. Collections are made in cash. Specify the adequate system towards collection of money. Control system over selling and collection of tickets. In order to achieve proper internal control over the sale of tickets and its collection by Y Company Limited, following system should be adopted: printing of tickets. Serially numbered pre-printed tickets should be used and designed in such a way that any type of ticket used cannot be duplicated by others in order to avoid forgery. Serial numbers should not be repeated during a reasonable period, say a month or a year, depending upon the turnover. A separate series of the serial should be used for such denomination. Ticket sales. The sale of tickets should take place from the central ticket office at each of the 5 centers, preferably through machines. There should be proper control over the keys of the machines. Daily cash reconciliation. Cash collection at each office and the machine should be reconciled with the number of tickets sold. Serial number of tickets for each entertainment activity or denomination will facilitate the reconciliation. Daily banking. Each day's collection should be deposited in the bank on the next working day of the bank. Till the time, the cash should be in the custody of the properly authorized person, preferably in joint custody, for which the daily cash in hand report should be signed by the authorized persons. Entrance ticket. Entrance ticket should be cancelled at the entrance gate when public enters the center. Advance booking. If advance booking of the facility is made available, the system should ensure that all advance booked tickets are paid for. Discounts and free pass. The discount policy of Y Company Limited should be such that the concessional rates, say for group bookings, should be properly authorized and signed forms for such authorization should be preserved. Surprise checks. Internal audit system should carry out periodic surprise checks for cash counts, daily banking, reconciliation, and stock of unsold tickets, etc. Next, test your knowledge question number 9. Question number 10. The effectiveness of controls cannot rise above the integrity and the ethical values of the people who create, administer, and monitor them. Explain. Communication and enforcement of integrity and ethical values. The effectiveness of controls cannot rise above the integrity and ethical values of the people who create, administer, and monitor them. Integrity and ethical behavior are the products of entities' ethical and behavioral standards, how they are communicated, and how they are reinforced in practice. The enforcement of integrity and ethical values includes, for example, management actions to eliminate or mitigate incentives or temptations that might prompt personnel to engage in dishonest, illegal, or unethical acts. The communication of entity policies on integrity and ethical values may include the communication of behavioral standards to personnel through policy statements and code of conduct, and by example. Next, test your knowledge question number 11. Your engagement team is seeking advice from you as engagement partner regarding steps for risk identification. Elaborate. Steps for risk identification. Assess the significance of the assessed risks, impact of its occurrence, and also revise the materiality accordingly for the specific account balance. Determine the likelihood for assessed risks to occur and its impact on auditing procedures. Document the assertions that are affected. Consider the impact of the risk on each of the assertions. Completeness, existence, accuracy, validity, valuation, and presentation relevant to the account balances, class of transactions, or disclosures. Identify the degree of significant risks that would require separate attention and response by the auditor. Planned audit procedures should directly address these risks. Inquire and document the management response. Consider the nature of internal control system in place and its possible effectiveness in mitigating the risks involved. Ensure the controls, routine in nature, occur daily or periodic, such as monthly. Designed to prevent or detect and correct errors, manual or automated. Consider any unique characteristics of the risk. Consider the existence of any particular characteristics inherent risks in the class of transactions, account balances, or disclosures that need to be addressed in designing further audit procedures. Examples could include high value inventory, complex contractual agreements, absence of a paper trail on certain transaction streams, or a large percentage of sales coming from a single customer. Next, test your knowledge question number 12. BSF Limited is engaged in the business of trading leather goods. You are the internal auditor of the company for the year 2019-20. In order to review internal controls of the sales department of the company, you visited the department and noticed the work device work division as follows. Notice it, the work division as follows. An officer was handling the sales ledger and the cash receipts. Another official was handling dispatch of goods and issuance of delivery challans. One more officer was there to handle customer or debtor accounts and issue of receipts. As an internal auditor, you are required to briefly discuss the general condition pertaining to the internal check prevalent in the internal control system. Do you think that there was proper division of work in BSF Limited? If not, why? The general condition pertaining to the inventory check system may be summarized as under. No single person should have complete control over any important aspects of the business operations. Every employee's action should come under the review of another person. Staff duties should be rotated from time to time so that members do not perform the same function for a considerable length of time. Every member of the staff should be encouraged to go on leave at least once a year. Persons having physical custody of the assets must not be permitted to have access to the books of accounts. There should exist an accounting control in respect of each class of assets. In addition, there should be periodical inspection so as to establish their physical condition. Mechanical devices should be used wherever practicable to prevent loss or misappropriation of cash. Budgetary control should be exercised and wide deviations observed should be reconciled. For inventory taking at the close of the year, trading activities should, if possible, be suspended and it should be done by staff belonging to several sections of organization. The financial and administrative powers should be distributed very judiciously among different officers, and the manner in which those are actually exercised should be reviewed periodically. Procedures should be laid down for periodical verification and testing of different sections of accounting records to ensure that they are accurate. In the given scenario, company has not done proper division of work as the receipts of cash should not be handled by the official handling sales ledger and delivery challans should be verified by an authorized official other than the officer handling dispatch of goods. Next, case study. Following is the extract of information taken from draft financial statements of F Limited engaged in manufacturing of bicycles put up before you for the audit for the year 22-23. 22-23 and 21-22 details are given. Revenue from operations, cost of sales, gross profit, operating expenses, finance cost, depreciation and amortization expenses, profit before tax, tax expense, current tax, deferred tax, total tax expense, profit after tax, and trade receivables, inventories. The company has not made any substantial additions in the plant capacity during the year 22-23. It has reduced its dealer network and is approaching customers directly using its online platform. Encouraging response has been received from customers and sales have gathered momentum through online platforms. You are planning to use analytical procedure as risk assessment procedures, keeping in view above, answer the following questions. The revenue from operations of a company has increased by 40% in the year 22-23 and as compared to the last year. There are no additions in the plant capacity. Which of the following statement is most appropriate in this regard? Option A, there is audit risk that revenue from operation is overstated. Second, there is audit risk that revenue from operation is not overstated. Third, there is audit risk that fresh customers of the company do not make payments. Fourth, there is an audit risk that company is overutilizing its plant capacity, leading to rapid plant obsolescence. First one, there is an audit risk that revenue from operations is overstated. Second, the operating expense of the financial year 21-22 and 22-23 are same. Which of the following statements is most appropriate in the overall context of case study? Operating expenses. Operating expenses 3825, same. Operating expenses figures of 2 years can be same. There is no audit risk involved. Second, it is an anomaly. However, there is no audit risk involved. Third, there is audit risk that previous year figures need to be revised under the Companies Act. Fourth, there is audit risk that previous year figures have been presented in the place of current year figures in draft financial statements. Answer D is correct. There is audit risk that previous year figures have been presented in the place of current year figures in draft financial statements. Next, trade receivables turnover ratio has increased from 1.44 months in the year 21-22 to more than 2 months in the year 22-23. Identify the most appropriate statement. In direct distribution through online platform, trade receivables turnover ratio is estimated to be high. Therefore, there is no audit risk involved. Second option, in direct distribution through online platform, trade receivables turnover ratio should have fallen. Therefore, there is no audit risk involved. Third, in direct distribution through online platform, trade receivables turnover ratio should have fallen. It is possible that some of the dealers may not be meeting their commitments of past contracts. Therefore, there is audit risk that trade receivables could be undervalued. Fourth option, in direct distribution through online platform, trade receivables turnover ratio should have fallen. It is possible that some of the dealers may not be meeting their commitments of past contracts. Therefore, there is audit risk that trade receivables could be overvalued. Option 4 is correct. Next, option D is correct. The gross profit ratio of the company has increased by 3% during the year 22-23 in comparison to the last year. Which of the following statements are most appropriate? There is an audit risk that there is overstatement of cost of sales. Second, there is an audit risk that margins with customers may have increased. Third, there is audit risk that closing inventory may be undervalued. Fourth, there is audit risk that cost of sales may not be completely recorded. Option D is correct. There is audit risk that cost of sales may not be completely recorded. Next, inventory turnover ratio has increased from 2.88 months in the year 21-22 to about 3.42 months in the year 22-23. Which of the following statements is likely to be in accordance with the overall context of the case study? A revenue jump in the current year may have led to need for raising inventory holding levels. Therefore, there is audit risk pertaining to misstatement of inventories. Second, raising of inventory levels may raise locked up funds in the inventories. There is audit risk that it can lead to rise in cost. Third, revenue jump in the current year may have led to need for raising